From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. The President of the National Constituent Assembly in Venezuela has joined a demonstration to support the government of Nicolas Maduro. Diosdado Cabello, along with thousands of Maduro supporters, marched in the city of Barquisimeto to defend the Bolivarian Revolution and Venezuela. Demonstrators said they want to protect the sovereignty and integrity of the country.
In the last 2 years, we have done 5 elections. There's no country in the world that can say that. There's not a single country that can say they are in regular touch with their people so they can make informed decisions. The last election on the 20th May 2018. Who do you vote for that time? Maduro. Who do you vote for that time? Maduro. We voted for Nicolas Maduro.
Meanwhile, Venezuela's Attorney General asked for a criminal investigation to be launched into the conduct of opposition leader Juan Guaido. Tarek William Saab said Guaido had put the country at risk by proclaiming himself as interim president. He is also proposing that Guaido is barred from leaving the country and from selling his assets once a probe starts.
We have opened a preliminary investigation. We have come to the Supreme Court to request cautionary measures. Cautionary measures so that in the midst of the investigation we will carry out against the citizen Juan Guaido, we are allowed to, in this case, 1, a travel ban to avoid his departure from the country, and 2, the ban to alienate and encumber property and real estate. 3, the freezing of accounts.
1, la prohibición de su salida al país.
The Attorney General's call came after the U.S. State Department officially announced that it has given Guaido control over some assets of the Venezuelan government. The certification applies to certain property held in accounts by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York or any other U.S.-insured banks. And President Nicolas Maduro has strongly rejected the United States sanction on state-owned oil company PDVSA, calling it illegal. He also described the Citgo company takeover as a robbery.
John Bolton has announced the imposition of a series of measures of so-called sanctions, which are unilateral, illegal, and are against the UN Security Council. They are unilateral, illegal, immoral, and criminal. With these measures, they are trying to steal the Citgo company away from us, a company of all Venezuelans. Be alert, Venezuela. The United States has decided to take the path of robbery of the Citgo company from Venezuela. This is an illegal path. I have given the necessary instructions to the owner of the Citgo company to start the political and legal procedures before the U.S. and international courts to defend the property and wealth of Citgo.
And Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza said the United States has proven that it only wants to get its hands on Venezuela's oil. He added that it is what fueled the U.S.'s support for the attempted coup. Our correspondent Alina Duarte explains the latest round of sanctions imposed by Washington.
The United States government's siege on Venezuela continues. This time, it is a new round of unilateral economic measures imposed on Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA.
Sanctions against...
According to U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, those sanctions will block $7 billion in assets and $11 billion in petrol exports in the coming years. The U.S. hopes the move will put pressure on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro.
He's not the proper leader of the country at this time, and I've said these are valuable assets that we are protecting for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. We will continue to use all of our diplomatic and economic tools to support interim President Guaido, the National Assembly, and the Venezuelan people's efforts to restore their democracy.
However, the application of such measures by the U.S. are not new to Venezuela.
The U.S. has been against a socialist government in Venezuela from the day that Chavez came to office, has been trying through all different ways, including supporting a coup in 2002, to get rid of that government. And then it has been using economic sanctions to try to exacerbate internal problems that the government has made to make the economic situation as miserable.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration says it intends to send $20 million in humanitarian aid after request from opposition leader Juan Guaido. But a member of the Constituent Assembly, Pedro Sereno, says humanitarian help is another mechanism for interfering in Venezuela.
Spain's Podemos party is expressing concern over the ongoing situation in Venezuela. The party's international secretary is warning that any military intervention in Venezuela's affairs could lead to a civil war.
Mr. Guaido has said that military intervention is something that is being considered, and he has asked the armed forces many times to go against the government. So the plan for the next day is this one: a military coup, armed insurrection, or foreign intervention. If some of these options fail, there is a serious risk of civil war, a war that people will pay for with their blood. The same Venezuelan people you say you are defending. So I ask, is the Spanish government going to support a war or foreign intervention in Venezuela?
But Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has accused the Spanish Prime Minister of joining to the coup against the Bolivarian government. Arreaza took to Twitter to respond to Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who called President Nicolas Maduro a tyrant. He says Sánchez is following the mandate of U.S. President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the President of the United Nations General Assembly, Maria Fernanda Espinosa, is calling for an urgent political dialogue in Venezuela.
The PJ has been closely following the latest political developments in Venezuela with great concern. Her solidarity is with the people of Venezuela. Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa calls upon all relevant parties to find political solutions to the situation to avoid the escalation of tensions and violence and further deaths. The President also calls for urgent political dialogue focused on the need for peace and stability. Ms. Espinosa says that the international community must contribute to a peaceful atmosphere. She acknowledges the mediation offers by different countries to encourage meaningful national dialogue involving all relevant stakeholders in Venezuela as the most effective way to restore the calm, as well as the cooperation needed for the country to work for its people. A peaceful solution in a manner that is consistent with Venezuela's constitution and international law is the only way to ensure the well-being of all Venezuelans.
5 people have been arrested in Brazil in connection with the mining dam collapse that killed at least 84 people. According to prosecutors, 3 employees of the Brazilian mining company Vale, as well as 2 engineers, have been detained. Vale has said on social media it is cooperating with investigators. Hundreds remain missing after the dam collapsed. And hundreds of rescue workers from the Brazilian military and foreign organization have joined the effort to look for survivors of the dam collapse. In the adjoining area of the dam, farmlands have been covered by thick mud. The rescuers are helping local residents in cleaning at the risk of being stuck themselves.
We were dispatched to search from early morning on Tuesday. Our team now works in this area. Earlier, we worked in a low-lying place. As the search continues, we find it harder to carry on. Our progress is hampered by the mud. We're getting stuck in the mud quite easily. We are very careful. This job needs to be cautious and careful.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos, has the latest.
The death toll from the mining dam collapse has risen to 65. 288 people are still missing. Firefighters have rescued 390 people from the mud. 114 of them are workers of the Brazilian mining company Vale. Several locations near the dam that collapsed have been already affected by the iron ore waste. The communities in the area have already been evacuated. Among the evacuees are the indigenous people from the Pataxo community and people belonging to the landless movement. The Brazilian Vice President Hamilton Mourão said the heads of the mining company would be sacked, although other government authorities said the administration would not intervene in the internal matter of the company because of the disaster. Meanwhile, the public ministry in the state of Minas Gerais will hold a hearing with 5 people detained. Among them are the engineers who approved the dam project.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. There are only a few days left until the presidential election in El Salvador. Our correspondent Ernesto Avalos tells us about how the country is preparing for the polls on February the 3rd.
Only 5 days till the presidential elections on February the 3rd. The Supreme Electoral Tribunal said it has distributed the electoral materials in 13 of the 14 departments of the country. San Salvador, the department of the capital, will be the last to receive these materials, in which the National Civil Police will help delivering. The National Civil Police will distribute the materials to around 25,000 electoral agents and administrative personnel. Moreover, they have informed people that the alcohol prohibition law will come into force a day before the elections and will be enforced on election day and a day after that.
We thank Ernesto for that report, and Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel held a meeting with the Council of Ministers to evaluate recovery efforts following a tornado that hit capital Havana. Díaz-Canel stressed the importance of learning from the experiences of these weather events in order to improve disaster prevention. 4 people died as a result of Sunday's tornado, and almost 200 were injured.
It was horrible. Once you watch the tornado from far away, lived in the trees, it's very painful to see from a distance, but to live it is frightening.
When I got to my house was closed off, and I saw the TV on the floor, along with a pile of furniture. The refrigerator was in the patio with all the food and everything outside. Even power lines were hanging down nearby. It's the most destruction that I ever seen in my life.
Members of the latest group of Central American migrants hoping to reach the United States have arrived in Mexico City. Over 1,000 migrants from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua are being temporarily housed in a sports complex. The shelter provides food, medical attention, and clothing. The migrants are expected to rest a few days before continuing their journey. Moving on, in Guatemala, landless campesinos are in a legal battle to recover the San Francisco Miramar farm of almost 50,000 square meters. More in this report.
These campesinos of Quetzaltenango say that they are victims of harassment and oppression. Their pleas come amid a legal dispute on the San Francisco Miramar farm, which they have occupied for 7 months.
Elements of a private security company has intimidated us here on the road, showing us their weapons and taking photographs.
Campesinos continue to allege that the landlord, Carlos Torreviarte, who claims to be the owner of the farm, uses rough elements of the police force to harass them. The history of this farm dates back to 1873 and 1885, when the president, Justo Rufino Barrios, gave land to the Germans. The land was then reclaimed during the Revolution of October 1944, according to an advisor to the campesinos.
Since 1954, when the revolution led by Castillo Armas occurred, the army took control of the land. But it turns out that in 1967, the Torreviarte family claimed ownership of the land.
Carlos Torreviarte has said that the campesinos are victims of a criminal network.
They are using land as an excuse to commit crimes and scams.
In the case of the San Francisco Miramar farm, which covers almost 50,000 square meters, the Constitutional Court could determine its rightful ownership.
A Brazilian mother has become famous due to her narration of football games to her differently abled son. Silvia Greco and her 12-year-old son gained recognition when the people of Sao Paulo saw her on TV. Greco narrates the game to her son, who is blind and autistic. Efforts are being made to make the game more accessible to differently abled people, although there's still a way to go. In Argentina, a country which has produced some of the best names in sports, spaces used for sporting activities are now under threat. President Mauricio Macri has signed a decree allowing the government to sell off land used for sporting activity. Let's take a deeper look.
Sport isn't a priority for the current neoliberal political agenda in Argentina, and now a presidential decree will allow 700 hectares of land used for sporting activities to be sold to construction companies.
The government, with this decree, has transformed the role of the sporting secretary into that of an agency to privatize sports and make cuts. With that intention, they can sell off sports institutions where Argentine sporting prowess has developed, only doing so to construction companies.
The economic crisis is affecting neighbourhood sporting clubs, which don't receive economic assistance. They don't have the money for the activities that they put on, and in many cases, they haven't been able to help the thousands of young people that rely on them for these activities.
The situation that we're going through is worrying because we're being affected. The costs have gone up massively. Electricity, gas, water. We've had to leave our concerns about improving the building to one side and focus on being able to pay the bills.
Despite being historic institutions, hundreds of clubs are being forced to work hard to avoid closure, but the impact on their revenue is terminal. They won't be able to offer workshops or school support, and they'll have to close football academies. There's no investment in infrastructure, and fewer scholarships that allow sportspeople to prepare themselves for international competitions.
This political system is injuring the club's economies. It's not just rates, but also daily impacts on clubs' existence. It's an attack on the country's sporting future, and it's Argentine state policy against local clubs. It makes you think, what do they want to change their clubs into? Companies? Us? We just want to be the local neighborhood clubs.
Sport in Argentina is going backwards. The role of clubs in bringing youth through the ranks is being lost, as well as the social role played for the most vulnerable sectors of society. In the face of all that, the government remains indifferent to the situation and only thinks about how to do good business.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. British lawmakers have voted against delaying the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union. MPs also voted in favor of a proposal calling on the British government to rule out leaving the EU without a deal, which will automatically happen on March 29th, even if a deal is not reached. Among the 7 amendments discussed, the Parliament also supported the proposal to remove the backstop in Ireland and replace it with, quote, alternative arrangements.
The ayes to the right, 300.
Our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, tells us more about this vote.
The British Parliament was once again dominated by the issue of Brexit this evening, with a number of votes taking place to effectively measure the strength of opinion on key issues surrounding the Brexit deal, which British Prime Minister Theresa May has failed to get past a majority at the British Parliament. As we were now a couple of weeks ago, on the 15th of January, she suffered a quite catastrophic defeat on her deal with the European Union, losing by 230 votes, the biggest loss in modern British history. Under normal circumstances, Theresa May would have had to resign, and new general elections would have most probably been called. However, we find ourselves in unprecedented times, with Theresa May hanging on both the vote and also a motion of no confidence that was done the day after that loss. Today, a vote on removing the backstop on effectively getting her deal with the European Union passed if the backstop with Northern Ireland to prevent a hard border was removed, which has caused so much controversy amongst the Brexiteer wing of her party, passed by 16 votes by 317 to 301. Now, immediately after, some members of the Scottish Nationalist Party declared that this meant that the Good Friday Agreement was in danger, and that is certainly something that has been heard on numerous occasions. The European Union have, for their part, said that they have finished negotiating effectively on repeated occasions. They've said this. So Theresa May now, I imagine, would hope to go back to them with this new majority for this renegotiation of the backstop element of her deal, in the hope that she can finally take this to the British Parliament to get a majority. So this seems to be the latest in this Brexit saga, which has paralysed the country, meant that there is a general feeling of unease as the 29th of March deadline approaches.
We thank Pablo Navarrete for that report. Protests were held outside Britain's Houses of Parliament against the Prime Minister's bid to renegotiate the Brexit deal with the EU. With exactly 2 months to go until Britain is scheduled to leave the European Union on March 29th, Theresa May is going to attempt to amend the agreement she negotiated. European officials have said it will not be possible.
We have built the crossing for more than 20 days. This is a humanitarian crossing either from the Palestinian side or the Egyptian side or between Fatah and Hamas. So, I hope the officials and people responsible reach an agreement to completely solve this problem.
The Palestinian Prime Minister and his government have tendered their resignation to President Mahmoud Abbas. Prime Minister Rami al-Hamdallah and his cabinet have failed in their reconciliation efforts with Gaza's Islamist Hamas rulers. The Fatah government will continue to carry out his duties until a new cabinet is formed. Meanwhile, Hamas has condemned the move as an attempt to exclude the group from Palestinian politics.
The government tendered its resignation under the control of the President Mahmoud Abbas. It will continue to take responsibility and carry out its duties until a new government is formed.
It is a hard time for the Palestinian cause. We should be united all over the country. For sure, the government has put itself under the control of the president.
Hundreds of lawyers in Zimbabwe have protested in the capital Harare against alleged human rights abuses by security forces. The lawyers are also accusing the government of interfering in the operations of the courts. The country has been on edge since violent protests broke out 2 weeks ago, sparked by a fuel price hike. Over 1,000 people have so far been arrested across the country in connection with the protest.
I think it's only because of the sheer scale of the human rights abuses that we have seen that has brought lawyers out today in the numbers that we have seen, and it really speaks to the validity of the grievances that lawyers have and that lawyers have on behalf of their clients.
Cool. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.